We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
Is that going to
In just a couple of days' time, the White House National Security Advisor, Tom Donilon, is expected to board a US government plane bound for Beijing and meetings with high Chinese officials. At the top of the agenda, cyber attacks and how to stop them. The meeting will take place just days after a major attack allegedly implicating the Chinese army was uncovered. According to an American security company, Mandiant, Cyber Unit 61398, attached to the People's Liberation Army, has been involved in massive operations targeting US government and corporate computers. During these attacks, reams of sensitive information, including results from clinical trials, blueprints, pricing documents, and negotiation strategies, were stolen. These revelations coming just 2 months after this attack on March the 20th. In South Korea, more than 30,000 computers and servers of the country's 2 largest broadcasters, 1 cable channel, and 3 banks out of commission. For hours, customers could not take money out of their accounts. After first pointing fingers at North Korea and then China, the confused South Korean Communications Commission said it was difficult, maybe impossible, to identify the perpetrators. But this man, Jaime Blasco, says he was able to identify the hackers as originating in China, and his words carry weight. He is one of the world's most experienced private investigators of cyber attacks. Born in Spain and now working in the United States, his clients include several governments in Europe, as well as corporations in banking, energy, defense and telecommunications, who turn to him in emergencies. And it's a dark world that Jaime Blasco is inhabiting. Yes, China is a big source of attacks, but so are governments and entities in the West, including the United States. And there is more to come, he warns us, as Jaime Blasco talks to Al Jazeera. Jaime Blasco, a very warm welcome and thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera. And please, if I could preface our conversation with a short apology to you in advance if I do ask you a question which you consider a little infantile or naive, because researching the sort of thing that you do is a bit like, for me, researching the work of an atomic physicist. It's full of ideas and thoughts which are really hard for me and frankly probably 99.99% of the population to understand, because when you look at the sort of computer code that you look at, I suppose it must sometimes be quite difficult for you to translate or explain it to corporates or government officials in a way that they can understand. Do you find that difficulty sometimes?
Yeah, of course. I mean, sometimes it's very difficult, but I think the key is when you are talking to people, you have to show them that which kind of threats they are facing when they are using technology. When we are talking to the government, it's the same that, I mean, they are facing threats when they are protecting physical infrastructures. So at the same time, we need to explain them that they can face the same threats and other new threats when they are protecting technology and digital infrastructure.
Which sort of organizations do you work with or for? It's a mixture of corporates and government departments, is it?
Yeah, I mean, we take care of our customers, so we have a wide range of customers, from the A companies, I'm talking about the biggest companies in the world, to B and C companies that maybe are running, and maybe companies that has 100 employees. So, I mean, the range of companies is very, very wide.
I've got an image in my mind of somebody very important from a large corporation or a government department looking at you with a mixture of panic and bewilderment in his eyes as he starts to understand exactly what you're talking about. Do you find sometimes when you explain these things to people that they just haven't considered exactly how dangerous things might be for them?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to think about how to properly explain technological things to them, because especially those guys that are running some specific departments in old companies, they are not used to technology. I mean, they have been working on that company for maybe 40 years, and at that time they didn't use any computer and any technology. So sometimes you find it very difficult to explain it to them.
So how do you say it? You say to them, you do realize that someone actually might be looking inside your computer at the moment. Is that the way you say it, or?
Yeah, in fact, I think the perfect phrase that describes what these kind of companies are facing is I'm trying to tell them that they don't have to think about if they are compromised. They have to think about when they got compromised and by who and why. So I mean, I think that most of the companies in this planet has been already compromised. That means that hackers are already in their systems, or have been. So they need to understand them, and from that point they need to invest the right resources in order to protect their system now and in the future. So
clearly the absolute sharp end of this, and the thing which keeps making the news over and over again, are the sort of attacks that we've seen on countries and sovereign states, the most recent obviously being South Korea. As we're having this conversation, the most senior defense officials from the United States and China have been meeting. As we know, the Obama administration is shifting its entire axis over towards Asia quite openly. The Chinese are saying the Pacific Ocean's big enough for both of us. So you have this potential new great game starting in the Pacific Rim, two big fleets, all the potential for a massive military standoff. And then there's an attack on South Korea because of the North Korean crisis. And you turn up and say, this attack on South Korea has got China's fingerprints all over it. That puts you in the middle of a massive diplomatic game, doesn't it?
yeah, it does. But I mean, if from a technical point of view, you are getting such a big number of clues that you can't, I mean, you have to show that to the world. So I mean, maybe a regular person won't be able to analyze that technical information and realize which country or which, I mean, the country where the hackers are based. But I mean, from a technical point of view, if you have been researching and investigating that kind of threats for years, you can be very, very sure.
Well, you've got to know that you're right, haven't you? Are you absolutely sure that you're right with these things?
Yeah, I mean, in the cases where we have published, we have made public who was behind these attacks, we were completely sure. I mean, not only us, but other companies and other professionals in the industry. An example was what we published, and I mean, Mandiant published this big report about APT1, that is one of the biggest groups that are based in China, and they tied these attackers to government levels within the Chinese government. And we helped and we published a lot of research on this specific group in the last few years. So I mean, it's not only Mandiant, it's not only us. A lot of security companies are giving clues, are making public these attacks.
But when you look at, I don't know what words to use, this is coming back to my original point, what shall I call it, the fingerprint perhaps of this attack. What is it that you're looking for exactly? What does it look like?
Okay, I mean, sometimes it's not only the fingerprint, sometimes if you invest the right amount of time and resources, you can get to the point of being able to identify the guy, the physical person that programmed that specific piece of code.
How do you do that?
Because maybe, in fact, we did a great research, it was last year, and we were able to identify the guy that was behind on one of the biggest malwares, the biggest virus that were being used to attack the US government and other military and technological corporations around the world. And how we did that? So it's easy. We find some clues inside the code, inside the methods that this guy was using, and then we were able to identify patterns on the internet, and that guy didn't remove that fingerprint. So we were able to...
So you match things up?
Yeah, because these guys, this specific guy, apart from writing software for malicious purposes, he was also writing, he also had a company, a security company, based in China. So with all that information, we were able to point to
But
him.
that doesn't necessarily mean that the Chinese government was involved in this, does it? It means that someone in China was involved in it.
No, I mean, sometimes you can point to a specific guy, and then when other sources come and try to study that specific individual and use human intelligence, I mean traditional intelligence, in order to point that this guy has some relationship with a government level or whatever. So.
And in this instance with South Korea, because there's clearly a massive geopolitical diplomatic significance, you then present your findings to whom? The Pentagon or the American Defense Department? Who do you speak to on this?
Most of the times you just publish your research on the internet, and then you start answering questions. Because at the end...
I can't help but think sometimes you must be like a character in a Robert Ludlum novel. You know, have you ever been threatened? Has anyone ever come after you for this?
Maybe.
But you think it's a risk worth taking, do you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we are the good ones, so we are doing it right. I mean, the bad guys are the ones that should be thinking about what they are doing, not us. I mean, we are trying to help companies, we are trying to help people, so I don't have to be scared about it.
So you just publish what you see, and you say this is the truth. Politically, people should make of it what they feel like.
Yeah, sure. Sometimes, I mean, we have published a lot of research about attacks against Tibet and other activists, mainly targeted by the Chinese government. And at that point, it's very easy to point fingers, because, I mean, if you have a group of hackers that are targeting a US military corporation and at the same time are targeting some Tibet activists, who is behind that? I mean, who wants to target both groups of individuals?
Well, there's an obvious conclusion that you might reach to that question, but equally, isn't it true that, you know, this is espionage after all, and of a sort that we're talking about? If somebody wanted to frame the Chinese government, then that could happen too, couldn't it?
Yeah, in fact, that's what we call a false flag operation, that is basically studying an enemy. I mean, in this case, you can study a specific Chinese group of hackers, learning how they operate, which kind of malicious code they use, and then replicating it in your environment and attacking using those techniques. So at the end, people like me will think that the Chinese guys are performing those attacks, but in fact, it is a different actor. It happens, but I mean, not so often.
It is extraordinary that you're 27.
Yeah.
And you're right in the middle of the sharp end of cyber espionage and cybersecurity, and potentially cyber terrorism as well. Just to go back to you for a second, does that make you feel frightened or important or what?
No, I don't know why.
You don't see it in those terms necessarily.
No, I mean, I'm a professional. I do my technical work, and I mean, I have been doing this for many years. So I don't know why my work is different from the work of a doctor or an architect. I mean,
how many people like you are there in, say, the United States or Europe, who do exactly what you do?
So I can say a number, but maybe around less than 100. I'm not sure, but maybe some dozens of people that are very focused on this kind of attacks.
And do you all talk to each other?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we have our own private circles where we exchange information. Also, sometimes at the government level, and sometimes from an individual circle. So.
It is funny because obviously you say that you're fighting for the good guys and you're publishing information which you believe should be used for the common good. In some parts of the world, you'd probably be classed as an American spy, wouldn't you? Have you had that accusation thrown at you by anybody?
I mean, I don't know why, because it's not only about the US. I mean, we are talking about Europe, we are talking about some parts of Asia. at the end, the bad guys are targeting the whole internet and the whole world sometimes. So I don't know why we're so focused on a specific country.
Well, I mean, the United States is the country that keeps making all the noise at the moment about cybersecurity and cyber espionage being the most significant threat now, even more than traditional terrorism. Yet the United States has been accused of using the same things itself, the Stuxnet thing with Iran, which was supposed to be a joint operation with Israel. I suppose it's quite difficult, you must think, for the Americans to take the moral high ground on this if they're actually doing the same thing themselves.
Yeah, I mean, but you have to think that we live in a world where a digital weapon it's more valuable than a physical one right now, at least in some specific operations. So, I mean, it's the new era, it's the new Cold War. So they don't, I mean, they will continue using these kind of weapons because, I mean, it's the one who dominates this kind of information warfare and digital warfare will be the one that will control the whole internet.
If you're talking about cyber espionage, if you compare it to older forms of espionage, when clearly a country needed large numbers of spies in different places, I suppose you'd argue that through this sort of espionage, a country might only need a couple of people somewhere else in order to look at everything that's going on somewhere else. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, right now, I mean, most of the intelligence agencies, if they want, they don't need much more field agents anymore, because at the end, most of the information is stored in a digital system. I mean, I'm talking about databases, I'm talking about telephone calls, I'm talking about emails, I'm talking about even access to webcams and security cameras. So right now you can run a whole operation just from with two guys at 1,000 miles from your actual target.
And they could look at the most secure or insecure computers that members of the public or government departments or big corporations have, could they?
Yeah, sure. In fact, we should think about that. If you don't want to be compromised, just power off your computer or at least don't connect it to the internet. It's the only way to be secure right now.
Well, that sounds like you can't protect yourself once your computer's on.
Yeah, of course, you can do your best. But the problem right now is that the enemy won't, I mean, if you are a valuable target, a valuable enough target, they will invest a lot of money, they will invest a lot of technology and research, and they will compromise you.
Let's take another recent example of a big attack, which was the coordinated attack on Saudi Aramco. Do you think that was an attack on Saudi Arabia or an attack on its oil and gas network, or is it the same thing?
I think it was both, because I mean I think the key thing behind the Saudi Aramco attack was that they wanted to perform as much damage as they could in that specific company, but with I think the main idea was like damaging the whole country. I mean the oil production.
It strikes me, speaking to you, that one of the things about this is there's the most enormous dysfunction between the potential threats that these things hold and the extent to which the public at large realises the danger. Things like this, you might argue, are victimless in the sense that you don't see an explosion, nobody dies immediately. But I suppose you'd say that the potential impact of these things, if the Saudi oil industry is destabilised, that could affect the whole planet, couldn't it?
I think we will face most attacks like the one in Saudi Aramco, and probably we will face in the near future some digital attacks that actually cause physical damage. I'm talking about.
How would that happen? How would you cause physical damage?
Okay, so you can cause physical damage maybe if you attack transportation systems, if you attack the energy industry. I'm not talking about that you produce that damage, but if you power off the whole smart grid in a country or maybe a small area, a lot of industries and a lot of systems that are using that energy will stop working, and that causes physical damage. I mean, that causes...
So if that's a nuclear facility, for example?
Yeah, that's the hardest example, but I'm talking about traffic control, I'm talking about transportation systems, I'm talking about hospitals.
You could stop a city, couldn't you?
Yeah, what happened if you just hack into a hospital and power off the systems? What happened with the guys that are there and that are very taking care
And do you think there are people or organisations out there in the wider world that have the capacity and the knowledge to be able to do that more or less when they feel like now?
I will say yes.
You're quite sure about that? Because it's a terrifying prospect.
Yeah, the problem here is that there are terrorist organizations and also gangs that they have a lot of money, and you don't need such a big amount of money to launch these kind of attacks. You just need 3-4 smart guys that help you launching those attacks. I
mean, this was the subject of the last James Bond film. Skyfall was about an expert computer hacker who was trying to bring down various parts of the world. It's scarcely believable that people might want to do this. Who are these people? Clearly, there's, I suppose, a difference between state-sponsored things of the sort that you and the American government suspects, and crime syndicates, anarchist groups? Who are they?
I mean, you can find dozens of different profiles of people that can do this. But I mean, I like that you mentioned the criminals. The criminal gangs, because especially the Russian ones has been running. Has been using the internet for a long time to rob money and to get to assault victims, and so they have evolved. Maybe in the past they have been running, they have been using the human trafficking or drugs or maybe weapons, but right now we see that they are changing and they are expanding the business and they are using the internet to make some profit. So
some people say that the American administration, which is, I think, probably globally in the lead on warning about the potential of this sort of thing, is actually only doing it as a reason to spy more on everybody. And as you know, the American government is having enormous problems legislating around this because of civil liberties infringement concerns. What would you say to people who think that there is a civil liberties issue around this?
Okay, I think that we should be very careful with this. When I see government and internet in the same phrase, I'm become scared, because the internet was created to be free.
To set people free.
Yeah. So the problem is that right now we are seeing that governments want to control the internet. Why? Because the internet is on the internet runs every single business and every single piece of data goes through the internet. So,
but it turns upside down the whole idea of what the internet was supposed to be for. If it becomes a tool of political control, that's disastrous for individuals' freedom, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. And I think we should be fighting against that kind of laws, because at the end you won't be more secure with that laws. You will be, you will face the same threats, but at the same time you will be more controlled by the governments and other entities. So, I don't agree with laws that try to control the internet. The internet is not the problem. People is the problem.
With all your knowledge, are you worried about the future?
Yeah, I am. I think this is gonna change very fast, and I don't know, but probably it's gonna be worse than we think.
Jaime Blasco, it's been illuminating, I must say, and slightly terrifying talking to you. Thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera.